Okay, hello and welcome to What is Google Analytics for? I hope you guys are having a great day so far and that this will be an informative webinar for you. For those of you who don't know us, I'm Michelle Drehoff. I'm the marketing director at Rock, Paper, Scissors, and we're a branding and marketing firm. We help our clients to feel more confident with their branding and marketing by basically painting a more clear picture of their brand, aligning their team, and reaching their audience where they are. We've been in this business for over 30 years, so we've seen a lot of change, and we've actually done a ton of changing ourselves to keep up with the times, including keeping up with the latest when it comes to Google Analytics, which is what we're discussing today. So also joining me for today's webinar is Senior Content Marketer Valerie Kinney.
Good morning, everyone. It's been a while since we've done a webinar, so a couple of housekeeping items for you guys before we dive into our topic today. First of all, I want to remind you that it's a conversation, so please use that Zoom chat to post any questions you have throughout the way. We'll answer as many as we can toward the end. That being said, Google Analytics 4 is a very new tool, and to be fully transparent, our team is still learning about it. We're in the process of taking some training courses, so we may not have all the answers today. That's okay. We're going to hold on to those questions that we can't answer or that we don't know or we're not sure of. And basically, we're planning on doing more webinars throughout the year on Google Analytics 4 to help you guys find your way through the platform, get more comfortable with understanding the data that it provides. So we don't know the answers today, or we're not 100% sure. We're going to hold on to those questions and we'll use those for future presentations. One other quick reminder, we would appreciate if you guys would keep your microphones on mute for right now, just so that we don't get any weird audio issues or feedback. And then once we get to the question and answers at the end, if you guys want to ask your questions over the microphone versus posting in the Zoom chat, you're more than welcome to do that. So with housekeeping out of the way, we're going to get started.
So in case you haven't heard, Google Analytics is sunsetting the Universal Analytics property on July 1st of 2023.
That is coming up fast.
Yes, it is.
So a lot of people are wanting to know, why is this important? Well, millions of websites track data to help them understand how their visitors are using their sites and interacting with it, and they do that with Google Analytics. According to stats from an organization called Built With that they released earlier in April, about 28 million live websites were using the Universal Analytics property, but only about 9 million at that time had migrated over to Google Analytics 4. So that means about 68% at that time were in need of migrating to Google Analytics 4. That's a big chunk of websites. Now, we know since those stats were pulled, more sites have migrated over, including some of our own clients that have already done that process. But point being, those sites that haven't migrated yet, if they don't get migrated by July 1st, when Universal Analytics sunsets, that means they're going to have a gap in data and they could risk losing data essentially until they get switched over. And we don't want people to have gaps. We want you to have a full picture of what's happening with your website. So if we can avoid those gaps, it's going to be better off in the long run. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what is Google Analytics for, the data it can collect, and the information it can provide once your site has been migrated over.
Yeah, so let's take a step back for just a second and have a quick refresher on what Google Analytics actually is. Basically, it's a free resource from Google that provides a foundation for businesses to be able to track and analyze their KPIs and really look at the ones that are relevant to their specific goals all in one place. And this basically allows them to make smarter decisions. So, and it can have a big impact on your marketing efforts if you can really understand how people use and respond to your websites and or any apps that you might have.
Absolutely. So these are unique insights that are gathered to help you make the most of your data and then turn that into how can you improve your efforts, the messages that you're putting out there, how people are interacting with your website and navigating through it. Analytics does work with Google's other publishing and advertising products. So that means you can kind of combine all these insights to deliver business results, kind of getting to what you need to drive those results. So that big lingering question, though, is why was the analytics, Universal Analytics property being sunset to begin with? So according to Google, Universal Analytics was built for a generation of online measurement anchored in the desktop web experience. So that is people using a laptop or a big old desktop computer, not necessarily other devices. It was basing it on independent sessions and more easily observable data from cookies. So that's, you guys have probably seen those notifications that you have to accept cookies or decline or approve just certain things that you're okay with websites tracking. That's what those cookies are. But technology and people's habits have changed. And over time, people have started using different devices to access the internet. We've all got it on our phones for the most part, unless you're my dad who's still using a flip phone. There are some people who prefer that, and that's totally fine. But most people are using a lot of different devices to access the internet. So basically that old methodology is not able to track people's complete journey and it's becoming obsolete. So it is time to upgrade.
Yeah, so the replacement is Google Analytics. It's actually Google Analytics 4. So the new property includes a number of new features and updates, as well as improved flexibility that's designed basically to help you discover and unlock valuable insights across your websites, an app you might have, or both. So it gives you a little bit more multi-functionality that's all in one place. So that's really the biggest thing. And then one thing that you really need to know, and we have talked about this a little bit already, but this is not an automatic update. So if your site hasn't been switched already, it will need to be switched and connected to Google Analytics 4 prior to that July 1st deadline. And Valerie mentioned that your site's data might not be connected anymore. So that's really an important thing that we're trying to just make sure everybody understands, because you may have that property. It might be listed somewhere in your like on your back end of your site, but it may not be properly connected yet. So that's a really key thing.
Got to get the website and the Google Analytics 4 talking to each other so we can collect that data. So Michelle, one of the things we're going to talk about today is what is the big deal with Google Analytics 4 and how does it differ from that predecessor, Universal Analytics? And so we're going to take a look at some of those differences now.
Yeah, so basically Google Analytics 4 includes a number of new features and updates, as well as improved flexibility that's designed to help you discover and unlock valuable insights across your platforms, websites, apps, or both, basically, without, like we said, relying on cookies. The one thing we talked about, one feature that's appreciated by a lot of people is that GA4 will no longer use cookies or keep IP addresses in its database. So this is going to basically ensure that people control how their data is collected and used. So that's a really important privacy feature that I think a lot of people will appreciate. And then the reporting piece of it is that Universal Analytics is the property type for basically web use only, as Valerie mentioned before, and apps would need a completely different property type to be able to track data in there. But now with Google Analytics 4, you'll have that cross-device platform reporting. So as far as the measurement piece of it, Google Analytics 4 is event-based instead of session-based. So that's a little bit of a shift. There's a lot of changes in what they're calling items, but basically everything is based on an event in Google Analytics 4. And then another huge difference is Google Analytics 4, the ability that Google Analytics 4 has to adapt and shift based on its machine learning. So it is much better at learning the audience's habits and then giving you insightful data based on that than the predecessor, Universal Analytics. So these are really the some of the key things, and then we'll highlight some other things. Valerie will go into some other key things that you'll see that are different.
Yep. So there's some changes in some of the metrics and what they were in Universal Analytics versus the new Google Analytics 4. So for starters, in Universal Analytics, there were only 2 user metrics, total users and new users. So you can see on this screenshot we've got here, it's only showing the total users right now, but new users is something that would be reflected in Universal Analytics. And then in Google Analytics 4, you've got 3. Total users, that's the total number of unique users who have logged an event on your site or your app. New users, and that refers to people who have interacted with your site or launched your app for the very first time. So this is a newbie, they've just met you. And then there are also active users, which is any user who is engaged, they've had an engaged session, or when Google Analytics 4 collects specific data about interactions, like someone's first event visit. We'll talk a little bit more about events in a minute, or the first time they opened an event, they had an opening event triggered through either an Android app or an iOS app. So depending on their device, if they were using an Android based or an Apple based product. So the slide has not advanced yet. Sorry, guys. So another thing we're looking at, Michelle, with this is the changes in page views.
Yeah. So in Google Analytics 4, page views are simply called views at this point. So they've changed the way they're referring to that, and they're including the total number of app screens and or web pages that your users see in a given time frame. So unique page views that we're used to with Universal Analytics will basically sunset with that property.
All right, and then a biggie is, what are they looking at in terms of bounce rates versus engagement rates? This is something that we've looked at for a while with Universal Analytics and their reporting of bounce rates. That metric is the percentage of single sessions in which there were no interaction with a page, no button or link clicks or anything like that. So this could be a user who comes to your homepage and immediately closes it out because they realize, oh, I'm not in the right place. Or it might be someone who takes a peek at the content on the page for, very short period of time, like a couple of minutes, but they don't click any links, they don't click any buttons or anything like that. With Google Analytics 4, the bounce rate refers to that percentage of sessions that were not engaged sessions. And so an example would be if Johnny were to visit your website, looks at the homepage for about 10 seconds or less, and then leaves without visiting any other pages or triggering any sort of event, button click, filling out a form, all those things. Engaged sessions, on the other hand, these last 10 seconds or longer, they have one or more conversion event. So somebody took some kind of action, and at least 2 page or screen views, depending on if they're on a website or an app. So essentially, Google Analytics 4, bounce rate is the opposite of that engagement rate. And the engagement rate is really what we want to know anyway. How are people interacting with your site or with your app? And with this change in how they're calculating things, you'll be able to find a more useful way to measure the level at which your customers, your audience, are engaging with your site.
Yeah, so the next thing we'll talk about a little bit is total events. And basically, this is, like I said, one of the changes in metrics that we're looking at. And in Universal Analytics, each event has a category, action, and label, as well as its own hit type. In Google Analytics 4, however, every hit counts as an event, and then these events don't have a category. They don't have a category, they don't have an action or a label, and all actions are considered events. So for example, if someone views one of the pages on your website, a page view event would be triggered at that point.
And so that's what you're kind of seeing in this screenshot right here. They've got some different labels used for these, how they're identifying the pages and so on in the website, and the actions that people took, what those event counts are. So that's what you're seeing on the screen right there.
Okay, so let's take a look at some of the benefits of Google for Analytics. We've seen some, but we're gonna really highlight what the biggest things are. So basically, Google Analytics 4 has been designed to scale with your business so that you can measure across all your platforms and devices. Basically, you can adapt your measurement strategy to the digital world. That's basically always changing. We know it. We just learned something and we have to relearn it. But Google Analytics 4 is enhanced by its machine learning capabilities. So it can also provide predictions that can help you make decisions and improvements when it comes to your marketing efforts. So basically, this means you'll be able to understand your customers across various touch points and really have a more complete view of the customer life cycle, thanks to that event-based measurements that you'll be seeing. So in other words, you're able to follow that customer all the way through their purchasing process, or whatever your specific customer's journey is.
So another feature is they've got more accurate insights with behavior modeling. We mentioned behavior modeling earlier. And so once you've got things set up, Google Analytics 4 can start gathering data to create predictive audiences. So when you implement a consent banner, basically on your website or your app, that is what we talked about earlier with the cookies. People are saying, yes, you can track me, or no, you can't. So when you implement one of those, analytics would be missing for users who decline consent. But what behavior modeling does is for those people who consent, it uses that machine learning Michelle just talked about to model the behavior of the users who decline analytics cookies based on what the users that have consented are doing. So basically, it's kind of like making some educated guesses based on the people who do let us track how they're interacting with the website, and accept those analytics cookies. We can track their journey through the website, and then it will basically give us some predictions of how they think people who aren't being tracked are letting us use that, basically what they're doing on your website.
Yeah. So then that's kind of feeding into that privacy piece. People are given a little bit more, control of whether they want to be private or not. But then this offsets that. So then, and then obviously the most important thing that most everybody wants is an improved ROI. So basically, you'll be able to improve your return on investment because you're getting a more accurate picture across your campaigns and all of your different marketing touch points. So Google Analytics will soon introduce custom channel grouping in Google Analytics 4. So that'll help you to see the performance of your different channels aggregated. So that will be a great feature that will really help you to really be able to see the full journey. And then an example of this would basically be a paid campaign versus an unpaid campaign.
So you can really kind of start seeing, are you getting your money's worth? Are those efforts paying off, or do you need to kind of take a step back and figure out, do we need to take a different approach with some of the marketing efforts? So with that being said, we're ready for questions. So if you have those, you can go ahead and post them in the chat box. We've got some questions that were submitted prior to. And like I said in the beginning, if we are still learning about this process. So if we don't know your answer today, our goal is that anything we don't know, we will
write down.
We'll write it down. We will work on getting answers and include that in future webinars. At this time, I'm also going to post a link in the chat, and this is for just a little survey. You don't have to take it right now, but I do want you guys to have it before we leave today. This will just give you an opportunity to give feedback for today's presentation. If there's questions you have about Google Analytics 4, as well as any other marketing topics or branding topics you want to learn about in the future. So I'm going to post that link right now. And Megan asked in the chat, what is advice for downloading Universal Analytics? Great question. I know that when you are in your Google Analytics platform, you can export data. I think it usually comes in a CSV file. But that is something, Megan, we will double check with our developers on to confirm if there's any other actions that would need to be taken to get your historical data out of there. And Michael asked, will Google Analytics 4 still request a viewer to accept cookies. Another great question. I'm not 100% sure on. We can ask our developers about that as well. We've got some great developers that we partner with that are really diving into this information. And so I don't think so based on the information right now, but that is another thing we will double check on.
Yeah, it sounds like cookies, the need for them is going away, but I do think that the user will still have a level of, they won't need to, they'll be able to stay private basically if they choose to. So, but my understanding is that cookies are supposed to be going away with the new property.
Okay. That asked, how hard is it to migrate over? I received an email from Google with a step-by-step guide. Full transparency, Michelle and I are not developers, so we don't know 100% how hard that is.
Depends on your technical level a little bit. I think for some people it definitely may be easier than others.
Yeah,
for sure.
if you understand how coding works, because there is going to be some code that you will have to add onto your website once you create the property for Google Analytics 4. That's the key piece, is you've got to get that code onto your website in order to get things talking to each other. So that is another thing our development partners have been great with, is helping us get our clients migrated over. That is the world that they eat, sleep, and breathe all day, every day, is websites. So, but we can definitely talk to them about that and get feedback for that. I'm going to hit some of the questions we got before the webinar as well. One of the questions that was submitted is, will I still have access to my old data? Yes, but you still need to switch before the sunset date. That's important not only for maintaining that historical data, but that then can allow you to have a better way to compare and contrast information year over year. Essentially, we know a lot of the things that have been tracked with Universal Analytics won't necessarily match up the way Google Analytics 4 is tracking information, but it at least gives you something to look at. And just that historical data is valuable because you can look back and see how were people interacting with your website previously. Were there pieces of content or anything like that that performed really well, that maybe there are updates on that topic that you can go back in and create more content on. Mary asked, what happens if I do nothing? So if you do nothing, I believe there's still a period of time for which you can go in and access your old Google Analytics, Universal Analytics data, the data that was collected on that property. But if you do nothing, that means moving forward, your website won't be tracking data. So that is one of the biggies, is got to have something there to track that data. Otherwise, it's kind of you're not going to be able to
won't have the benefits of Google Analytics.
And it'll be harder to make more informed decisions about how you want to update your site and understanding what content are people engaging with. Great question. Another one of the questions that we got before the webinar was that in Universal Analytics, you can add key dates. They call those annotations to the timeline. Can we still do this in Google Analytics 4? Yes, this is actually a great tool to use. If you want to note specific email marketing campaigns, or when you maybe launched a pay-per-click ad campaign, that sort of thing. So then later on, you're not questioning, why did we have this massive spike in traffic on, one particular day or throughout a course of a couple of months? We launched we launched this email on this date, or we did a pay-per-click campaign from June through August 2023. You've got that noted in there. And
I believe there's some auto features that will actually alert you when there's something that is not usual for your user, for your data, basically. So that's kind of a neat feature, that it'll actually, give you that data because it recognizes that it's not normal. So if you had this big spike, basically. So
we've had some questions come in beforehand about urgent tracking modes. Those are those UTM codes that you use a lot of times to track specific campaigns and whether those need to be moved over. We did have a quick conversation with our developers about this, and you will be able to track these codes in Google Analytics 4, but moving the codes kind of depends on how things are currently set up. and that process of switching over. The way that our team is doing this is they're building the Google Analytics 4 codes basically that are connected to Universal Analytics, so they can drive the current settings that are in Universal Analytics over to the new Google Analytics 4 property. Now, if you're starting something new with fresh code, it'll all automatically track down those parameters when the code is implemented on a landing page on your site. But a key thing to remember is that when you're launching new landing pages built specifically for campaigns, sometimes people don't always set these up if they're launching those on their website to match the website's current design template. So if you're not following your current page settings and you're making it look a little bit more unique, that's a case where you just want to double check and make sure that the Google Analytics 4 code is implemented on those new landing pages to ensure that campaign data can be tracked. So very important, very good questions. Does anybody else have any questions? All right. Move on to the next slide. If you do think of something before we wrap up, go ahead and post it and we'll answer if we can. Katie, you are welcome. Thank you for joining. So what are these steps for migrating over to Google Analytics 4? GA4 is what we've shorthanded it to. That's what Google is shorthanding it to, in case we didn't mention that before. So in order to avoid losing that valuable data, so you can continue seeing how people are interacting with your site, that migration really needs to happen as soon as possible. And you could wait until the last minute, but the reason you don't want to do that is so that we can make sure that everything is tracking the way it should, gives us time to troubleshoot if you need to before July 1st arrives, and also just avoid that last minute scramble. We all know things get stressful when you're trying to do something at the last minute, so the sooner you can do that, the better. Michelle mentioned this earlier in the presentation. This process involves creating that new Google Analytics 4 property and then adding it to your website so they can talk to each other and the data collection begin. Vet asked, what is the turnaround time once this is transferred over? I think usually launching the property and getting it connected to your website the way our developers are doing it is a pretty quick turnaround. I think just like a couple of days for them to work on that, but then making sure everything is tracking. We just want to have that lead time if you're leaning on our team to do that, or really if you're leaning on anyone else to do that to help you out with that effort. The sooner you can get started, the better, because July 1st is coming fast and furious.
Yes, it is. So if you need help, we want you to know for sure that we are available. So we've got great developers that are helping support us through this. So as we said, this is all new to us, and we know it is new to everyone out there. So some people have already made the switch and have started like trying to figure out what the differences are. And it'll be take a little bit of time, but if this is one thing we can take off your plate, we are happy to do it. We've even got a discounted rate. So in order to help motivate people to try and get this done a little bit earlier rather than later, we did do that rate discount to $560 if you sign up by May 17th. You can take advantage of that. And then we've got a even further discounted rate for our nonprofit clients as well. So if you are a nonprofit, just let us know that, and we will implement that rate for our nonprofits. So if you're interested in us helping with this service, you can just email us at help@123shoot.com. And then we'll also be saving this recording of today's presentation, and we will send it out in a follow-up email sometime next week. So be sure to keep an eye out in your inbox for that, and you can go back and listen to any of the other questions that are in here. Also, just kind of remind yourself of some of the differences between the two properties. And then we will also be following up with other webinars as we get more into it and start, showing different insights that we glean as we start working with the new property. And also we will, if there's any key questions from today's webinar, we may follow up with any of those that are simple to be able to follow up in that email as well. So I think with that,
yeah, there haven't been any more questions. So we wanted to keep it short today so you guys can get back to the rest of your day. Lunch, if it's lunchtime for you, whatever that may be. So thank you for joining us. We hope you guys have a great afternoon, and we will be in touch next week. And hopefully you guys can tune into our future webinars. Bye, everyone.
thank you so much.